You see this guy? This is former U.S. Naval Intelligence Commander who just 2 days ago revealed shocking information to Congress that the CCP is trying to assassinate Taiwan.
Great Scott.
Be it political or literal, the CCP is finding multiple efficient ways to occupy Taiwan. And so far, they have been extremely successful. Neither Taiwan nor the United States have found proper ways to counter them.
Are you serious?
Just 2 days ago, this commander clearly described to U.S. Congress members how the CCP is trying to assassinate Taiwan. So, 我的台湾跟美国男朋友准备来爆米花 because 真的是代志大条咯。没了。So, a few days ago, Congress held 2 consecutive hearings about the CCP, and one of them was called Stand with Taiwan, countering the PRC's political warfare and transnational repression.
The title of this hearing rhymes with major legislation of mine, the Stand with Taiwan Act. That bill, which I've introduced in the last 2 Congresses and will soon be introducing again, has great bipartisan support. Senators Graham, Duckworth, and Coons are the top co-sponsors, and I would encourage strong bipartisan support with my colleagues here. And what that would do is if there is a military invasion of Taiwan by the Communist Party and the PLA of China, this would trigger punishing comprehensive sanctions on the Chinese economy and particularly leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. Punishing economic, trade, financial, energy. We all want deterrence in the Taiwan Strait, and I think the threat of these massive sanctions might be critical in terms of deterring a cross-strait invasion of Taiwan by the PLA.
This is Dan Sullivan, a former Marine and current Republican senator from Alaska. And during the height of the COVID pandemic in 2021, when Taiwan was lacking vaccines, he and 2 other Democratic senators flew on a U.S. military aircraft accompanying Biden's 750,000 vaccine doses to Taiwan. Simply put, he is a senator who strongly supports us and strongly hates the CCP in his goddamn bones.
PRC is also attempting to rewrite international norms, distorting UN General Assembly Resolution 2758 and pressuring countries to embrace Beijing's view that all necessary measures it might use to achieve unification with regard to Taiwan. Most disturbingly, the PRC has labeled Taiwan's vice president, who I know well and is a good friend of mine, and other officials as obstinate Taiwan independence diehards, threatening them with life imprisonment or worse. It has declared any Taiwanese citizen, including those living abroad, can be punished under PRC law. In a closed-door meeting earlier this year, senior CCP officials Wang Huing reportedly called for a global expansion of these intimidation tactics. According to credible reporting, Wang instructed embassies and security services, hopefully they're not doing it here in America, but they probably are, to implement, quote, proactive intimidation against so-called radical Taiwanese independence advocates worldwide, including in the United States of America.
Expanding intimidation tactics? This don't sound like government behavior at all. This is more like the mafia or Yakuza. And when it comes to China and mafia and Yakuza, they all end with an A for asshole. This can't be a coincidence.
I would also like to thank the U.S. Congress and administration for your long-standing bipartisan support for Taiwan. Last fall, our national baseball team won the World Baseball Softball Confederation's Premier 12 Championship, but our players were not allowed to wear jerseys bearing our country's name, nor could they proclaim our country's name in public. After hitting a divisive 3-run home run, our team's captain pointed to the blank space on his jersey where Taiwan should be, celebrating the name that cannot be named. This is the reality we live with, constantly being silenced by the PRC.
And then there's another special aspect of this hearing. That's that they even invited a current Taiwan legislator to testify via video conference.
The PRC has also established United Front organizations in Taiwan to invite religious groups, village chiefs, and college students on heavily subsidized trips to China. For college students, there are special programs attracting young Taiwanese to study, work, or start businesses in China. These activities aim to integrate them into China's economy and eventually come to view China's politics and culture in a positive light. After last year's elections, the two major opposition parties formed a majority voting bloc in Taiwan's legislative yuan. After their electoral victory, the leading opposition party, KMT's caucus leader, led 17 of its lawmakers, nearly one-third of the entire caucus, to visit China and meet Chinese officials.
Now, this could be a coincidence, but how in the hell could Taiwanese legislators possibly assist China in undermining Taiwan's national security laws and defense budget? Maybe it's just a coincidence.
Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe f*** yourself.
I spent 35 years in the military and at least half a dozen tours dealing with Indo-Pacific matters in one way or another. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss PRC political warfare against Taiwan. I'd like to open by describing my direct engagements with Taiwan over recent years. I visited Taiwan 3 times as the Director of Intelligence for Indo-PACOM. I happen to be the first 2-star active duty flag or general officer to visit Taiwan in over 40 years when I flew to Taipei to brief President Tsai in 2021.
Now, this is a Rear Admiral Commander of the Naval Intelligence Command. In simple terms, he's the boss maritime version of Ling Ling-chi.
I was directed by the NSC and the OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, to outline PRC military courses of action up to an invasion. During this briefing, and another one I delivered a year later in 2022 to share lessons from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I highlighted the most serious threats to Taiwan's survival. While we mainly discussed high-intensity combat operations under modern conditions, one of the major points I made was that Taiwan wouldn't survive if it only focused on an outside-in strategy of hardening its outer shell with military forces. Taiwan would need to apply equal efforts at strengthening its gooey center to ward off threats from the inside. Decades of PRC political warfare machinations had created vulnerabilities inside Taiwan that the PRC wouldn't hesitate to exploit during an attempted takeover. Taiwan would need to get real about these pre-existing omnidirectional threats. This conversation naturally led to discussions that went beyond merely stopping the PRC offshore or on the beaches to improving defense in-depth capabilities, urban operations, strengthening internal security, counterintelligence, fostering better civil-military coordination, and the merits of mobilizing society to engage in people's warlike actions that allow an inferior to defeat a superior.
This term, people warlike actions, is extremely important. Simply put, Taiwan Lang, you are already in war, yo, and everyone is already on the battlefield. This ain't no goddamn drill. This is a war.
Wake the fuck up!
It may be useful to think about Beijing's political warfare efforts as a highly orchestrated, interconnected, and multi-tiered set of activities that include white, gray, and black elements. White or overt means involve CCP diplomatic actions, official media propaganda, military operations, and trade relations that are all used as levers of influence. Gray or semi-overt means involve such actions as Chinese Coast Guard, maritime militia, and ghost fleet, encroachments in the maritime space, the use of foreign media to propagate and reinforce disinformation, funding and manipulation of political parties, discounted junkets for politicians, academics, journalists, and students to visit China, where they're then influenced by United Front Work Department reps, and co-option of social media influencers and celebrities, and so much more. Black or covert means involve agents in place for the purpose of espionage, influence, and/or sabotage, recruitment of former Taiwan military, police, Coast Guard personnel, establishment of sleeper cells and weapons caches, offensive cyber operations, and activation of criminal groups such as the Triads in Taiwan for various purposes ranging from harassment to potential assassination.
Yo, this is testimony from a U.S. Naval Intelligence commander, not mine. Buying off social media influencers, recently many Taiwanese YouTubers and streamers suddenly became very fond of China, shoving their nose all the way up the sphincter of the CCP. Some even say they want to turn Taiwanese people into Chinese people.
You.
Now, I'm not sure if this matches what the Rear Admiral mentioned, so maybe it's a coincidence. 对吧?
As Admiral Suden mentioned, the intelligence cyber attacks inside Taiwan have been really quite remarkable. And there are a few new things that are worth highlighting, even though this has been constant. The first is that some sources have been forced to record videos of professing their loyalty to the PRC, so to be held back for a time of war, to be used for propaganda purposes. Of here are other military officers or other soldiers saying, oh, well, actually, I profess my loyalty to the PRC. Another is the targeting of the Military Police Command, which has sort of increasingly stepped up because this is the presidential protection detail. It is about learning about where the leader is at all times and demonstrating real-time awareness of this. Because one of the lessons they learned off of the Ukraine war is that you don't want smart political leadership to survive.
Now, this expert witness is Peter Mattis, a former CIA counterintelligence analyst. And his job was to counter spies who spy on spies. And he mentioned tracking leaders' locations at all times. 这个很重要咯，因为齁
You know, in March of 2024, we all recall that B. Kim, who was then vice president-elect, had an incident where in the Czech Republic, there was an attempt to foment a car accident, which is something that happens so often here. Wei Jingxiang, so many others have had it, but in this case, it was obviously Taiwan-related. And the Czech intel community mitigated that threat.
Now, this car accident attempt, which has been confirmed to be executed by CCP government personnel, raises a very critical question. How in the hell was the CCP able to track the whereabouts of our vice president? Was someone specifically following her? Or are there Chinese spies in the Czech Republic? Or maybe, possibly, 有可能 even spies within the vice president's entourage. This is a very crucial issue.
So, first and foremost, espionage is an act of violating trust. And if you think about all of the interactions that are required, for example, in Congress, among staff in an office, trust is fundamental to that issue. And so when you have these cases, when you have the weaponization of any connection to the PRC to try to gain access to information to people, you are breaking down the bonds of trust that allow government to work, that allow actions to be taken with some degree of appropriate secrecy when governments need to act in those ways. And you inhibit the ability of a government to have a private conversation about how to deal with matters. How does it affect Taiwan? It affects the ability of the government to work with itself. It affects the ability of the trust that Taiwan's partners have in dealing with that government. It affects the kinds of decisions about what is acceptable to share, both in terms of information, what weapons are acceptable to sell, what kind of interoperability or plans for interoperability are acceptable. These are all things that get factored in, or all things that are affected by the CCP's espionage against Taiwan.
Spies not only threaten the lives of Taiwanese officials, but also damage the trust between Taiwanese people and their allies, and even trust within Taiwan itself. Taiwan is facing a very real war, yo, and yet most Taiwanese attitudes towards China's hostility is that of something peaceful. Nigga, that's like working at 7-Eleven and some fool comes in with a gun at your head, and your response is, 会员载具有吗？累积 open 报一下购吗？发票存里面吗？
You niggas are crazy!
And so they believe that they should be penalizing not just the leadership to show that they are less effective or ineffective in being able to defend Taiwan, but also to punish the voters that put them in power. And so they are stress testing Taiwan. They are trying to exhaust the military as part of that punitive effort. They are surrounding it to show that it'll be cut off, that there'll be no chance of rescue. This is a psychological warfare attempt to show that that they won't have cavalry coming over the hill, or if it tries, it can't get there.
When it comes to this regard, the CCP has been very successful. Most Taiwanese news stations haven't even reported it at this moment as you're watching this video. The United States is conducting its largest military exercise in Asia in a decade off of Taiwan's coast.
We see a number of these anti-war, anti-imperialist groups like Code Pink, Answer, Coalition, Pivot to Peace, protesting alongside Chinese Chinese groups, overseas Chinese associations, and United Front linked groups as well, right? And so in their messaging, they're framing U.S. support for Taiwan as part of U.S. imperialism and warmongering, and reframing China's position as one of preserving peace and the status quo. And so by extension, right, this implicitly recognizes Beijing's sovereignty claims over Taiwan, right? And so the Chinese government, may not be directly controlling these groups, but they see this as a way to further legitimize its narratives and reframe the Taiwan issue.
This is Audrey Wong. Now, don't let her young, cute appearance fool you. She is an expert who specializes in studying how China uses non-military means to invade other countries.
And perhaps even more worryingly, we're seeing United Front actors reshaping the political landscape in the United States in favor of pro-Beijing actors, while suppressing supporters of Taiwan, right, with the goal of reshaping the public discussions and political discourse around the Taiwan issue. So my own research and other reporting has examined how these Chinese Communist Party linked groups and individuals not only try to get positions as political aides and power brokers in local and state politics, for example, but also are trying to increasingly act as a political machine of sorts to try to get pro-Beijing individuals into elected office, right? And so Chinese government is playing identity politics, exploiting contentious social and political issues to, such as anti-Asian hate and public safety, right, with the goal of gaining currency among overseas Chinese populations and legitimizing Beijing-linked individuals and organizations as grassroots leaders that are defending the community's interests and rights. And so this mobilization, right, then in turn serves as a foundation for Beijing's political machine to field preferred candidates and rally votes to get them elected, right? And this has direct implications for the Taiwan issue as well as other issues that the Beijing government, Chinese government cares about.
Identity politics is the most dangerous thing for any democratic country, especially ours. It divides a country into men and women, straight people and gay people and people in between, plain people and indigenous people, married and unmarried, those with children and those without. Look at social media, yo, especially threads. These are all trending topics of the moment that people are constantly arguing about online. But when it comes to the CCP, they only recognize one identity: Chinese. This shows just how easily multiculturalism can be exploited by the CCP.
But I wanted to maybe just get a commitment from the three of you to, as the record's going to be open for the couple weeks after this hearing, to maybe get and I know I was reading, Admiral, your testimony, it's really, written testimony is great, but some really specific examples of Chinese actions on our soil intimidating American citizens or Taiwanese or Chinese citizens on our soil. I think Americans really need to know that. If you guys can provide an excellent, like Admiral, real quick, the police stations in New York and so what was that? That was kind of crazy.
Yeah, so those,
what the hell was that?
Senator, those were fronts to go ahead and be able to keep watch on the Chinese diaspora and be able to...
Physical buildings of Chinese communist officials in New York keeping track of American citizens?
That's right. And those... you
gotta be kidding me.
To apply pressure points on Chinese to behave, and those who maybe were considered too oppositional to be able to deal with those. So,
well, those kind of things, if we can get more specifics, if the average American knew about that, again, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. We're a free country, and we should not have the gosh darn Chinese Communist Party trying to intimidate Americans on our soil. No way.
Now, we covered this before, and it ain't no secret. The CCP already has physical police stations within the United States, threatening U.S. citizens on American soil. So let's guess if the same thing happened in Taiwan. Are there CCP police monitoring certain online streamers or political figures, supervising and even threatening them for United Front work?
Maybe. So I'll offer you one as a fellow intelligence officer here. In 2020, it started with a pineapple. I was working a counter-influence operation, and we saw in rural Taiwan, a group, unbeknownst to many of us, started going after pineapple farmers. And slowly, by prefecture after prefecture, they were able to identify that the pineapple farmer was going to be a linchpin in the 2020 election. They messaged directly to them, and unbeknownst to us at the time, 98% of pineapple exports ended up in mainland China. And the ability to influence a pineapple farmer, and I'm a guy from Iowa who knows very much the commodities market, meant that they were going to be influenced when they went to that ballot box. Down ballot, the Chinese ability to micro-target individuals within the voting population within central Taiwan certainly had an outcome in both what the DPP and the KMT, the mainland China party, saw in their local elections. This was strategic, it was effective, and without a shot fired, they were able to change the course of an election, arguably through legal means. This is what George Kennan has identified as political warfare. I'll be very specific here. The employment of all the means at a nation's command short of war to achieve its national objective.
So the CCP has been successfully undermining Taiwan's democracy through identity politics, gangster-like intimidation, and buying off internet influencers. This is happening because most Taiwanese and Americans have not realized that we are in the middle of a war without bombs. CCP's attack plan is very tight, and Team Democracy is losing.
Tight, yeah!
However, if you manage to share this video with more and more people, in fact, as many people as you can, we might actually stand a chance of winning this war. Ingwei Hall.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
That's just me, and I'm biased as fuck towards Taiwan because I fucking love this country. But let me know what you think down below. Remember to like, subscribe, and keep it civil, and I will see you on the flip side.
Don't trust China. China is asshole.